Hey, I just want to welcome you all here, and I just want to welcome Stephanie Freethy here today, who is a life coach for women and actually a retired police officer. So, yes, Stephanie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your business and what brought you here today.
Well, it's funny that coming into my new business working with women actually came out of the toxic relationships in my life. And the current toxic relationship that I'm working through is divorcing my ex-husband, who is a narcissist. And it's just been interesting to look back over my life. And it was in realizing and accepting that he's a narcissist that I was able to look back at my life and be like, oh my gosh, like my mother was a narcissist. And it was like all of a sudden, all of those why questions that I had, like, why was my childhood like this? Why did my mother treat me this way? And all of those things. And it was like all of a sudden I started getting all these answers. And in a weird way, it brought me healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look at my current state with my marriage ending and everything like that, I don't regret my marriage because it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me a lot about narcissism, trauma. It brought me healing. And it's also what led me to starting my business because my ex-husband is actually the one who taught me about business and entrepreneurship and getting it all started and that sort of thing. So if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even be here right now.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, I don't regret my marriage at all. And a lot of people say, well, I don't regret it because it gave me my daughter. Yes, absolutely. But I really don't regret any of it because it brought
Mm.
me where I am today. And so now my marriage kind of ended and I left my former career around the age of 40. And I found myself going, well, who am I now?
Yeah.
Who am I? My whole life, society has taught me that I'm supposed to be a wife and I'm supposed to be a mother and I can have a career, but wife and mother is where it's at and all of these things. And it's like, all of these things are crumbling and falling apart. So who am I now?
Yeah.
And that's in me exploring that is when I realized how many other women in their late 30s and early 40s are going through the same phase of like, who am I? What do I want? What do
Yeah.
I want for my life? What is my purpose? Because I thought being a wife and a mother was my purpose. And while I love that and it gives me purpose, it's not my passion. It's not my fire. It doesn't bring me like purpose and fulfillment. So what am I doing? So it's kind of like come full circle and brought me all together to where now I have started this business where I am working with women and helping them overcome the trauma and the things from their past so that now they can start again and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, who am I? Who do I want to be? And what do I want to do with my life?
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think a lot of people are going through that right now. Like, it's so endemic in our society, I reckon, and it obviously significantly generational. And I think the more people out there at the moment, like life coaches who can bring light to this issue, is just bringing so much healing to, I think, not just women, but also men as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, so I guess our next question is, so tell us what your childhood was like.
Well, now that I have so many answers to my why questions, in realizing that my mother was a narcissist, I'm able to look back and I grew up never hearing, I love you.
Mm,
There was no emotion, no affection. There wasn't even communication. Like my parents divorced when I was 18, but they didn't fight. They just didn't talk. They didn't
mm,
talk unless they had to. And so I remember I didn't even know that saying I love you was normal because as children, when we grow up in a certain environment to us, that's our normal. That's
mhm,
normal. So I never even knew that that was a normal thing until I was in high school and I was old enough to be able to be going out with my friends. And I was at my friend's house and we were about to leave and his mother told him that she loved him and he said it back and they hugged. And I was sitting there and I was just like, oh, how embarrassing. His
mm,
mother just told him that she loved him. And I thought it was going to be like this mortifying, embarrassing thing for him. And it was completely normal. And it was in that moment that I had this epiphany. Oh my gosh, my family is not normal.
Mm.
We're the ones that something is wrong.
Yeah.
So the first time I heard I love you wasn't until I was around 18. And it was because I finally asked my mother, why don't you ever tell me that you love me?
Yeah.
And her answer, of course, was, well, I don't know. I used to tell you that I loved you when you were little. And I'm just like, well, I don't remember that. I grew up my entire life not even knowing that I was loved or thinking that
Yeah.
I was loved. I don't know. So that's kind of how I grew up. There was no affection, no emotion, no communication. We didn't talk about our problems. So everything was bottled up and internal.
Mm.
And I was also bullied in school, but I think because I had such like low self-esteem and low self-worth that, you know, who really knows what makes, I mean, we have ideas of why kids bully because of what's going on in their home environment and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But I often question, was I an easy target?
Yeah.
Because I internalized everything and I just kept to myself. So did that make me an easy target? And I had told my mother once that nobody liked me, everybody was mean to me. And her response was, just be nice to everyone and they won't have a reason not to like you.
Mm.
Now, as a child, that made perfect sense to me. But as adults, it's like, no, like there are mean people in this world that are going to be mean to you no matter what. And you have to teach coping mechanisms or teach children just how to stand up for themselves, how to have self-worth and all of those things. So I grew up with none of that. And I was in graduate school, I got my master's in psychology, and I started suffering from a very deep depression. And that is when I finally went, okay, something's wrong with me. I can't take care of this myself. And the school offered free counseling. So I started seeing a counselor, and that started, you know, like a 15-20 year process of on and off therapy, of healing and everything. But it's just interesting to grow up thinking that the way you grew up is normal, and then to one day have your eyes opened and realize, oh my gosh, this is not normal. And then slowly over your adult years to repeatedly have your eyes opened. Part of it is hurtful and really hurts to have your eyes opened. And then part of it is just like relief. You know, like I said, I have all of these answers to those why questions now. So it's kind of both sides of it. And I guess it's what you choose to do with it that matters the most.
Yeah, 100%. And I think once you open your eyes to the narcissist, um, you see it everywhere. You can't not see it anymore. And it's hard. And I resonate with you a lot. I also have a narcissistic mother.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's the first time that was even brought to my attention was with my therapist with the police department. We had our own psychological services.
Mm.
So I was able to go for free. And I remember talking to him, I was about to get married, and my therapist was the first one to be like, he's a narcissist. Are you sure you want to marry him? And in my head, I'm just like, not a narcissist.
Yeah.
20 years ago, when I was getting my degree in psychology, like narcissism wasn't even taken seriously. So I hadn't learned about it. And now to have my therapist tell me he's a narcissist, I'm thinking he's not obsessed with his looks. He's not full of himself. You know, like I had all of these warped ideas of what a narcissist is. So I married him. And then over the years, it took a while for me to finally go, okay, maybe he is a narcissist, and start looking into what a narcissist is. And then it was just like, my eyes were opened, and I was just like, oh my gosh, my mother's a narcissist. My boss was a narcissist. I dated narcissists. Like, it's almost like once you're the victim the first time, it's almost like it opens this floodgate and makes you a magnet for more narcissists. I don't know what it is.
I felt that way too, to be honest. I was actually only met nicer people before I met a narcissist, and then it was a narcissist after a narcissist after a narcissist. And I don't know what that happened. It's a question I asked myself as well. I was like, how did I have these okay ones
Exactly.
went back in the day, and then now it's not okay?
Yeah, we
But I
just
guess,
attract them like magnets. I don't know what it is about us. It's like they can sense, oh, there's a willing victim or
yeah,
something. But once we are aware of narcissists and their tactics, then that empowers us, which is amazing.
yes, it does. So, okay, so I guess my next question to you is, what is your business? And obviously, how has it grown? And, like, what are you offering to the world?
Let's see. As a serial entrepreneur, I don't know if you went through that, but it was like, oh,
Yeah.
this sounds like a great idea. This sounds like a great idea. So I've tried all kinds of things, but it all kind of led me to here. And sometimes you see like counselors, therapists who haven't been through trauma.
Mm,
They actually had the kittens and rainbows childhood with
yeah.
parents who loved them, and life has just dealt them a wonderful hand. And so it's like they've been given the skills to help people, but they've never experienced it themselves.
No.
And because I've experienced so much, not just narcissism and bullying, but lots of other things, I feel like I've been on both sides of it. Like I've been the victim. I've been in the patient chair. I've been in the classroom where I learned about it. And I feel like I'm kind of full circle. I can see it from all angles, which enables me to help people in a way that I understand.
Yeah.
And that's what drove me to decide that this is what I want to help women do, because I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and she has also been through a lot of therapy. And one of the things she said about therapy is that often you just sit there and you just talk about the problem
Yeah.
over and over and over. And it's like, how long can I talk about this problem? Like, what actually gets me over it? What's the solution? What's the plan that is going to take me forward and past this? I can
Mm,
only talk about it so much. And so whenever I decided to get certified as a life coach, I learned a specific framework that actually teaches you how to identify what the circumstance is that you're going through, and then how that leads to our thought processes. How all of a sudden that voice in our head starts going, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? All of those things. And all of those are based on our childhood and our subconscious mind and all of these things that we've gone through. But it teaches you how to identify those thoughts and to see that your circumstances are not the reason that you have the results in your life that you have. It's actually the way that you choose to think and react about those circumstances.
mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is that not only did that open my eyes to something amazing, because it's like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I'm not a victim and I don't have to be a victim. I can
Mm-hmm.
take control of this. But it also had the solution side of it. So I'm able to take this negative thought pattern that I have in my head, identify where it's coming from, why I'm reacting to it the way that I am, and then, okay, how can I turn this around and change the way that I'm thinking, put new thoughts in my head, retrain my subconscious mind to think positively,
Mm-hmm.
and to work towards now taking actions to get the results that I want in my life. So I'm no longer a victim and my circumstances no longer control my life. And I love that. So
Mm-hmm.
I have taken that, and I think therapy is amazing, but often it's not accessible to a lot of us for different reasons. A big one is cost. I was very fortunate that therapy was always free for me because I was in college and then it was through my employer. But now that I'm not employed, I'm like, what if I wanted to go back to therapy? Like,
Mm,
how would I pay for it? And so I decided, instead of charging people to coach them one-on-one, which is still not within a lot of women's means, I decided to create a program where I teach them the framework and guide them and help them work through it so that they can help themselves. They don't have to continue to suffer in silence. They don't have to
mm,
continue to be a victim. They can actually learn how to take control of their circumstances and help themselves. So that's what I do.
That's amazing. And so kind and generous of you too. I think that's one of the things that I love most about like coaches in general, is that we're always trying to just make it accessible and just have women feel some sort of hope and power again in their lives. And I think we give that to them where therapy, I don't think always does. I obviously don't live in the States. I'm not part of that therapy system. But personally, I feel like talking about the same thing over and over again quite often just brings more of that. I think there are amazing therapists out there as well, but I think there are also some that aren't, as you say, they're not experienced in what it's like to actually feel this way or understand what it's like to go through some of these horrible emotional situations. Okay, so my next thing is with you is sorry, my questions have disappeared. Okay, so I guess tell us a little bit more about your toxic relationship, like when it began, when you noticed it becoming toxic, and like when did it end? I know you've kind of touched on some of these already, but just to clarify.
Yeah. So when I first started dating my ex-husband, I think I was about 34 and I had never been married, didn't have any kids. And I'm like, this biological clock is ticking so loud in my head right now. So that was a huge factor in me settling, because I had dated up to this point, but there was no one who was really like, I guess, wasn't the one or wasn't ready for me or whatever it may be. And he was. And in the beginning, there were no red flags. And I remember telling myself, well, there's no red flags. Something was missing, and it was that emotional component that a lot of narcissists don't have. But he played it so well that he told me the things that I wanted to hear, and he did the things that he knew would win me over. And one of the first arguments we ever had was unlike anyone I had ever experienced, because I was so I had never dated anyone that we couldn't just talk about whatever was going on. It wasn't like a blame game. There wasn't yelling, screaming, throwing things, anything like that. It was just, we were able to talk about it. And with him, it was immediate into blame, pointing the finger. And I had never experienced that before. So I was just like, it caught me off guard in a way that it actually, and because I had been through a lot of therapy already, it made me stop and reflect on, okay, is this my fault? Am I being irrational? Am I letting my emotions control me? Because that's another thing he loved to do, is say that. But anyway, that was the very first argument where I was just like, whoa, I was just caught off guard. But in the back of my mind, I still had that, well, I'm getting old and I want to have kids, and this is the first guy who's really acting serious. And so I was basically lying to myself and everyone that he made me happy. And I knew that at the time. Every single time someone would say, oh, are you happy? I literally knew I was lying and saying no. But I married him anyway. But that was the thing with him, is that it was always my fault. He twisted everything around on me. My emotions were not his problem. They were my problem. If he hurt my feelings, that was not his problem. I needed to be in control of my emotions. It's just so warped. And then he used Christianity against me as well, as in a toxic way. So where it was just like, well, you're not being submissive enough. You're being disrespectful. It was just always coming at me with that, because he knew that was a weakness for me, because I got saved while we were together. And so he knew that I was constantly seeking that knowledge and that education and that sort of thing. So he knew that that was a weakness he could twist around on me. And based on my faith and what I know that, okay, I'm supposed to be submissive. Am I not being submissive enough? So I spent the first 2 or 3 years just questioning me, I actually I say that I was humbled enough to go, okay, is it me? Let me look at me first and see, am I the problem? But after a few years, I was just like, I am not the problem here. Like, this is ridiculous. I've been through years of therapy to work on me and fix me. Like, this is not me. I'm not the problem. And that kind of started the ball rolling, to where I eventually was just like, I hit a point where he could no longer control me and manipulate me. And that was like the beginning of the end. And I've experienced this with other narcissists before, that when you start to resist that control and manipulation, they try that much harder to control and manipulate you. And it's kind of like, you have to pick your battles, because it's like, if I don't let him have his way, how much worse is he going to make it for me?
Yeah.
How much harder is it going to become if I don't give in this time? So you end up playing the game with them. But I think eventually he finally accepted, okay, this isn't working because she's just done. I can't control and manipulate her anymore. And I had already decided I want a divorce, but I had left my career as a police officer and I was working on getting my business started. So I didn't have an income. And I felt stuck because I was like, what do I do? I can't leave him. I don't have an income. But one day he actually came to me and said, it's so funny. He came to me in his way and he was like, I would like to co-parent our daughter. And I'm just like, what? What are you talking about? And he was like, I don't want to be married anymore. And I just went, okay. And the look on his face was just like shock and almost defeat. And he later told me, he was like, I expected you to be really angry and to blow up, and you didn't. I think it was a blow to his ego that I was just like, okay, I'm good. I'm done with you.
Yeah.
We can be done with this. I'm totally cool with this. And I told him, I was like, look, I had already thought about it, but I don't have an income, so I couldn't leave you. So surprisingly, the divorce, it's not final yet. It's almost final, but it's been pretty calm. And now that I no longer have to compromise with him and get along with him, it's been a lot easier for me to stand my ground. Like knowing places during the divorce process where he keeps trying to manipulate me out of money. And I'm just like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't have to compromise with you. I don't have to keep you happy anymore to make my life easier. Like the answer is just no. So we were together a total of about 7 years, married for 5. And our daughter is 3. So
Yeah. Just a wee one.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That sounds like it must have been quite a rocky time for you guys. And having a baby in the middle of it as well must have been quite a stressful situation to go through.
Yeah, the postpartum was pretty rough, especially when with his manipulation, it was, oh, well, this is the reason you took maternity leave, so that you can stay up all night with her while I get a good night's sleep. So,
oh, wow. Okay.
oh yeah. I mean, I had to call the police one night. I mean, there was just things happening that were not right.
Wow. Okay. I was going to say, yeah, what were the most apparent toxic traits from him that you noticed?
Something that kind of came across to a lot of people was he would be condescending, but he would do it in a way that one of his insecurities, I realized later on, is that he's not dumb by any means, but he over presents his intelligence. When he and I first started dating and he would meet my family, one of the first things he would tell them is that his IQ is 144, so he's a lot smarter than other people, which was so embarrassing to me. And I was just like, oh my God. But I realized over time that he oversells his intelligence, because that's actually one of his insecurities. Like I'm by no means like highly intelligent, but I'm smart, I'm educated, and he knew that I was smarter than him. So that was always something with me and with other people, is that he would be condescending, but he does it in a way that it makes you question, did he
He just
mean that the way I took it? I don't know. And I would have to tell people, yes, that's exactly how he meant it when he told you that or text you that, because they would be like, I don't know if I took this the wrong way. And I'd be like, no, you took it exactly the way that he meant it. So that was one of the first things that a lot of people noticed, was he can be condescending. It was way worse when he was drinking. He'd be like
yeah.
really mean when he was drinking. But for me personally, it was the arguing in circles and the blaming, and everything was my fault. He never apologized for anything. So a lot of very classic traits of narcissists, but they've been doing it for the majority of their life. They're so skilled and creative at it that you actually think they're right and you're the problem.
Yeah. So with those people that spoke up or asked questions or started noticing it, did any of them speak up for you or try to help you?
No, several of them are like his friends, and I think that because he's known them their whole lives, that they accept him as, oh, that's just who he is. They don't realize he's a narcissist. And I don't like hold that against them, because I mean, it took me 40 years to realize my mother was a narcissist. So it's just
Hmm.
one of those things that they just accept, oh, that's who he is. And with the couple of people that came forward, they were actually male leaders at our church that, like within our church, they try to respect, like the women talk to the women, the men talk to the men, they just do it as a matter of respect. And so I would be talking to the couples, like reaching out, like, this happened, I don't know what to do. And the male would say, okay, well, I'll reach out to him and just check on him and see how he's doing. And it was usually a text message. And then I would check back in with them and they'd be like, well, he sent me this text and I don't quite, and I would look at it and I was like, oh, he's being condescending. And they'd be like, because they're trying to be polite and they're just like, yeah, okay, that's what I thought, but I didn't want to. And I was like, oh, no, he absolutely meant it the way that he said it. He knows more than you. He's smarter than you. He's half your age, but he knows more than you. Who are you to tell him anything? So,
Yeah. Okay. But like they didn't try to help you specifically to.
no, I think in a way they didn't. On one hand, they didn't know how to help, but on the other hand, I wasn't specifically asking for it either,
Yeah.
because I was still in that in between of something's wrong, we need help, but I'm not ready for a divorce. And so we tried counseling, he would quit. We tried programs through the church, he would quit, because every time it came down to he was the problem and he didn't want to hear it. So he would always quit.
Hmm.
And then, of course, by the time I was ready to be done, well, I had all the answers I needed. I didn't need anyone else's assistance. So
Yeah.
it kind of worked out in time the way that it was meant to.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I think sometimes the like overarching function or thing that I kind of notice more than anything is that quite often people seem to notice, but they don't feel like they can help, or don't feel like they don't think it's their business to intervene or say anything.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I guess like in this in regards to where you're at, like how did this affect your self-esteem?
Fortunately, because I had already been in therapy off and on for several years and had been working through all of my past trauma, I was in a good place there. I think the place where I was low was in my self-worth. For
Mm.
example, being 34, never having been married, you kind of start facing that, well, what's wrong with you? Why doesn't anybody want to marry you? Um, so I think my self-worth was very low. And that played into the majority of it.
Yeah.
But it's another thing that I think comes with age, is that in coming into my 40s and having experienced so much, and now I'm a mom and I've been married and I've grown as a person and all of these things, all of that has kind of grown on its own and come back to where, like I said before, it's like I've come full circle. I know my worth. Um, because there was this, I've always wanted to be a mother. And that was a really big thing for me was, okay, here's somebody who finally wants to marry me and I'm getting older and I want to have kids. So it was almost like that was driving me in the back of my mind was I've got to get married so I can have kids. And now I've got my baby girl and it's like, my life is complete. If you're going to treat me like garbage, you can go. Because I have this precious girl that if I were to stay with him, she would be raised in the exact same environment that I was raised in.
Yeah.
And for me, my brother is a very, very nasty narcissist. And for me, I consider myself incredibly fortunate that I didn't like fall into that. Because I think with a narcissist, like my ex-husband, I know that his mother's a narcissist and he's told me stories of how she treated him in relationship to his brother growing up. And he told me like he intentionally put up a wall. He was like, yeah, I was tired of being hurt and letting her hurt me and everything else. So I just put up a wall and I said, I'm not going to feel anything anymore. And to me, I was just like, boom, that's the second you chose to become a narcissist. And I can see my brother's older. And so I'm just like, that's a defense mechanism for them. It doesn't make it right. But at the same time, it makes it easier for me to choose to forgive them because they were victims of narcissism too.
Yeah.
And that was their defense mechanism. That was the only way that at the time they knew how to cope with being a victim of narcissism. And for whatever reason, my coping mechanism was different. And so I didn't want to stay in a relationship with him and grow her up in a house where mommy and daddy didn't talk. They didn't sleep in the same bed. They didn't say, I love you. They didn't hug each other and her thinking that that's normal.
Yeah.
And I also, she's only 3 now, so I have a little time to figure this out, but I will definitely be watching his relationship with her because the cycle absolutely breaks with me. I will not let him do the same thing to her. So
Yeah.
that is what gave me the most strength to just leave him was I have to break the cycle, not with her, but for her.
Mm-hmm.
She
Yeah.
deserves to have the best chance for a loving, healthy life possible. And that starts with me.
Exactly. And like I personally have I had the same aha moment. Luckily, I did have a child young, so she's always been with me. But I did also, every time that there was a relationship issue, generally it got to the point where I can't put her through this, or I won't put her through this anymore. And we would, I'd do whatever we needed to do, like, and now I've also not allowed anyone into her life until I know that it is safe for her to be around that person. So I guess like going into the end of this interview now is just kind of asking you, what kind of advice do you have for any women that are, like in these toxic relationships, like they may be wanting to build a business, already have a business. What would your advice be for them?
Before you can ever even do anything with your business and take it forward and succeed, you've got to fix what's in your head first. And just like I said, with like my self-worth and settling and that sort of thing, there's so much fear. Like I didn't leave him because I was like, I don't have an income. What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
I had options. I just didn't like my options. I didn't want to go live with my mother. I didn't want to have to go and like ask my friends if I could shack up with them for a few weeks with a toddler, I had options. I just didn't like them, but they were there. And I think with some women, it's that whole, well, if I leave, who am I? What am I going to do? Who am I going to be? Like right now, I have someone who brings in an income or makes me a wife, helps me with my kid, whatever. And so we kind of get into this, this helplessness.
Yeah.
And I some of that I feel like is a choice we make, like I said, because we don't like our options.
Yeah.
And some of it also comes down to our own self-worth. Like our self-worth is so low that we are willing to accept our children being in this toxic environment because we're suffering from our own identity crisis. If I leave this environment, who am I? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Who will I be? And those answers don't come until you step into the fear. And that is the biggest lesson I've learned in the last year and a half, is that we have to step into the fear first before anything else happens. It's not going to happen beforehand. We don't have courage first and then step through the fear. We step through the fear and go, okay, I survived. I'm okay. And I have a little bit more courage. Okay, what is the next thing that scares the crap out of me? But I need to do this. Okay, I'm gonna do it. And you step through that fear and you're like, okay, I'm all right. I survived. I made it. And you get a little bit more courage. And you just have to step into the fear repeatedly over and over and over again. And the confidence slowly comes, the courage comes, the self-worth comes. So I think that is my number one biggest piece of advice is whatever scares the crap out of you, you've got to step through that fear. One step at a time, one hurdle at a time. Embrace the fear because that is where your future is.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for showing up today in this
Thank
interview,
you.
Stephanie, and sharing your amazing story and knowledge and, I don't know, just beautiful love and light.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.